shall be updating you also on the latest development from the United Nations General Assembly, where we had also President Biden lauding President Ruto on that particular initiative of deploying Kenya police officers in Haiti to try and help with the menace of the criminal gangs in that area, and is imploring also the United Nations Security Council to make sure that that particular security arrangement is installed in place very quickly. And after issues have been raised on that particular platform that we shall be interrogating as well, with the disbursement of the $100 billion that has been promised by the global north to the global south as far as climate change is concerned, but nothing yet is forthcoming. So they're imploring and entreating the countries that are concerned to make sure they make good of their promise. In the country, there is a menace of the youth bulge. We flip that particular narrative of how the youth is our future. We saw them thronging in Embakasi trying to just get up sports at the Kenya Defense Forces that was recruiting. And looking at that telling picture was very, very interesting. And we want to see, is it a demographic dividend, or this is a demographic ticking time bomb that is happening right now? We shall be interrogating that deeply with our panelists as well. What happened when now we have a very youthful population? Almost 70% of the country is deemed to be a youthful face, but also employment is not there. And we remember also President William Ruto speaking at the United Nations during the International Labour Organization conference there. He implored the world right now to be also looking at Africa with a youth bulge, that we have a heavily, of course, youthful face in Africa leading in the world. Unemployment spectre also is #1 in the continent or in the entire world. We shall be looking at that as well with the latest development on Al-Shabaab and the lifting of, or the now retreating of the Amitus in Somalia. What does it portend as far as fighting terrorism is concerned? African Union mission there is pulling out soldiers in phases, and the last batch will be in December 2024. There is a lot that we have to discuss, and of course, going along, we shall be looking at other areas as well, following the war in Ukraine, where also we had President Zelensky speaking during the United Nations General Assembly. This is Global Today, but let's see how the weather is today so that you can actually be prepared. Let's see what is headlining the dailies this morning. This is what is on the front page of the Standard today. Why Chiloba was shown the door is what is on the front page of the Standard this morning. Why Chiloba was shown the door. Audit blames suspended CA boss for overvaluation of property by 64.47%, resulting in a major or in a mortgage of 25,000, that is 25 million instead of approved 16,720,000. Ezra Chiloba accused of exiting staff without reviewing their mortgages, causing the authority a financial exposure of 28.8 million shillings. Suspended Communications Authority of Kenya boss Ezra Chiloba thrown out after he was sucked into a multi-million shilling staff mortgage scandal, exposing a bold audit which has also sucked in Secretary to the Cabinet Mercy Wanjau during her time as CA Acting Director General. And this story continues on page 6 and 7 of the Standard today, and we can see the pictures here. Secretary to the Cabinet Mercy Wanjau named in the audit report for allegedly defaulting on 18 million shillings mortgage for her Lavington Wood Green Terrace home in Nairobi from November last year to March 2023. And on the sidebar as well, curtains falls on My Land is Kenya icon Roger Whittaker. You can read all about it on page 3 of the Standard today. Remember, every Wednesday you have the Enterprise Magazine coming your way, and it's just focusing on what we were talking about: graduate pushed to alternative, quote-unquote, jobs. Alternative jobs is all about the gig economy. The rise of independent contractors in 2023 also is what it is focusing on. You can read all about it inside the Standard. And looking at the teaser, alarm as July's money supply fall by 419 billion shillings. Alarm as July's money supply falls by 419 billion shillings. This is on the business pages of the Standard this morning. And then Russia goes after Wagner Africa Power. You can follow the story on page 20. And champions, Man U clash with Bayern. That is on page 32 of the Standard this morning. Let's see what the Daily Nation is holding for us. 4 days of hell. We're just hacking back into history. Westgate attack 10 years on. Fulenku. It was a baptism of fire as the Westgate raid made him the good man in the wrong job. Joseph Olelenku, a career hotelier, had been a surprise pick for Interior Security CS for newly elected President Uhuru Kenyatta. He was up to the task, he said, and promised to deliver on his mandate. But the tragic events of September 21st, 2013 that left 67 people dead will change everything. And when it all started at around midday on that fateful Saturday, the minister had no idea of what was about to happen. And this is the story that you want to follow on page 7. We shall be looking at this as well. 10 years on, have we managed to clamp down on the menace of terrorism in the country and the whole of Africa as it is right now? And also what I had mentioned earlier with the exit of the African Union mission there in Somalia that is being carried out in phases, lapsing in December 24th. What does it really portend as far as terrorism is concerned? And we shall be looking at also how tight our security is right now. Should there be any, God forbid, terrorist attack? All right, do we have ourselves prepared and ready? All right, ready defense is a question. And you can follow this story on page 7, as I've mentioned, on the sidebar. Intrigues. All right, intrigues behind Chiloba's suspension as CA boss. An audit of CA's mortgage scheme cites Director General for conflict of interest after applying for and approving his own mortgage loan, as well as being both buyer and seller in a transaction. Right? He was actually a trading firm all by himself, buyer and supplier. And you can follow the story on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Intrigues behind Chiloba's suspension as CA's boss. There's a typo there. Also, My Land is Kenya hitmaker Roger Whittaker dies at 87. The death on Monday of famous British folk singer Roger Whittaker has plunged Kenya and the entire world in deep mourning. You have this story on page 3 of the Daily Nation. Azimio split? That is a question right now. Karua Kioni fronts new political outfit. Na Kenya Party leader Martha Karua and Jubilee Party Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni yesterday fronted a new political movement lending some credence to possible differences within the opposition, dubbed Kamwene Leadership Forum. The new formation to champion the interest of Mount Kenya region started gaining traction after Azimio failed to name a member from the populous region to the National Dialogue Committee. This story is on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Kamwene Leadership Forum. Right, we shall go maybe to Professor Peter Kagwanya to tell us more about Kamwene Leadership Forum, if he has any sort of idea what it's all about, and the Mount Kenya region as well. That is on page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. This is how it looks. Oops, it jumped to the next page. Let me just go back there quickly so that we can continue pace with the paper review. That is the Daily Nation. The Star. 50 years in jail for gays, lesbians. This is the bill. The anti-gay bill that is being steamrolled by Homa Bay Town MP Peter Kaluma. Law criminalizes change of sex or procedures intended to change gender, and owners of premises where same-sex act happens to pay 2 million shillings fine or 7 years in jail. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. That is the new family law that is being sponsored by Peter Kaluma. And you can see what has been happening in Mombasa. Protests have been also on the streets regarding the gay movements or premises that are harboring the queer community. And you can see them up in arms there in Mombasa. That is the latest, and the bill also is on. So this is 50 years in jail for gays, lesbians. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Star this morning. And the Mackenzie I know is a loving family man. This is what Rhoda Maweu, the wife of Mackenzie, says. He's got a clear conscience, according to her, and you can follow the story on page 22. He's a loving family man. And remember, they've been also given extension in the slummers, in the cells, for the next 180 days. And that particular investigation is still ongoing. Numbers still ticking up from the Shakahola graves. You can read all about it inside the Star. People Daily is up next. Why Chiloba was sacked. On the spot, emerging details now indicate that an internal audit carried out by Communications Authority established that suspended Bose and his predecessor, Masiwan Jao, currently the Secretary to the Cabinet, culpable in the multi-million shilling mortgage scam. And the story continues on page 4 of the People Daily this morning. And Controller of Budget is warning you, brace for tough times ahead. Margaret Nyakongo warns that weakening shilling, rising public debt will make it hard for government to render basic services. Basic services is the operating word. And so you are forewarned to brace for tough times ahead. That is from government. Government will not pay fiat. This is what also Namomba says, looking at the sports pages of the People Daily this morning. And steps up exams plan amid El Nino fears. Education PA says measures taken to identify areas prone to flooding to enable net prepare for distribution of test materials in time. This is the People Daily. Boda wafikiwa. Mswada ulio mbele ya Seneti utanyoosha sekta hiyo ambayo wahudumu wake ukaidi kanuni na kutowajibika. Right, just trying to bring sobriety in that particular sector that has been very unruly and not observing any traffic rules, cab crawling, riding on the right side of the road, also, so to speak, overloading or carrying more than one passenger, right? So it says here, watakaobeba zaidi ya abiria moja kutozwa faini ya 20,000, jela kwa miezi 6 au wafungwe jela kwa miezi 6. Watakaopatikana kwenye njia za kupitia kwa miguu kutozwa 20,000. Watakao shirikiana kushambulia mtu kuifanyia au kufainiwa 100 au kifungo cha mwaka moja jela. And the rest of the details there, you can follow it inside Taifa Leo as well. So, boda, we hope that will bring sobriety in that particular sector at the end of the day. Also, wana mazingira watoa tahadhari kuhusu El Nino. The environmentalists are warning, and also they are telling the government to take seriously the issue of El Nino and preparedness. Are we robustly preparing for the oncoming storm that El Nino will actually come with? And that is the story that you want to follow inside the Taifa Leo this morning. Malia billionaire kupigwa mnada. This is Munga, and you can follow all the details inside the Taifa Leo this morning. Business Daily, as we buckle down to it right now. Kenya targets Chinese imports in new tax evasion crackdown. That is a splash. Kenya targets Chinese imports in new tax evasion crackdown. Treasury is seeking partnerships to stop undervaluing of products. Multinationals also on radar for transferred pricing. That story continues inside the Business Daily this morning. EABL gives female employees 26-week pregnancy loss leave. EABL gives female employee 26-week pregnancy loss leave. So if you have had it says if you had an experience or you've lost a baby before, of course, giving birth as well, you are considered. East African Breweries Limited has started giving female employees who experience pregnancy loss up to 6.5 months paid leave to grieve, a move that sets new bar for Kenya's companies on diversity and inclusion. That is the story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily this morning on page 2. Also, the side of hospitality seminars, rent cost taxpayers extra 5 billion shillings. Top government officials gobbled an extra 4.99 billion shillings on rent, hospitality and seminars in the year ended June compared to the previous period, defying calls to cut the wastage of taxpayers' funds and ease pressure on the exchequer. Also, Munga assets set for auction in new debt row. 3 prime properties owned by businessman Peter Munga are set to be auctioned by creditors seeking to recover their unpaid dues, marking the latest debt tussle for the billionaire investor. Also, you can follow it on the page 6 of the Business Daily. How increasing interest rates set bank for profit windfall. Commercial banks are set to gain from the rising interest rate environment as returns from both government securities and private sector lending continue to increase. You can follow this story on page 14 of the Business Daily this morning. And there was a question also that was being bandied around regarding the return of the interest caps. This is something that also the legislators are mulling over, a story that we can follow on this morning as well. Right, in Tanzania, World Bank proposes more taxes for the rich. This is what we have as a splash. World Bank proposes more taxes for the rich. And you can follow the story on page 2 of The Citizen if you're waking up in Tanzania. And prioritize books over buildings. Education Minister advises MNH performs unique chest surgery. That is the story you want to follow inside The Citizen as well. The life and times of Tanzanian scholar who died with 7 degrees. The life and times of Tanzanian scholar who died with 7 degrees. Right? I don't know if Professor Peter Kagwanja can recognize this gentleman. Right? Maybe, you know, in the academia world, yeah, the networking is robust in East Africa. Right? You can read the rest of the details inside The Citizen as well. And in Rwanda, fresh details emerge as Kigali Green City projects takes shape. That is what we have on the front page of the New Times. And you can read the rest of the details on page 4. And proposed changes in bill governing evidence in court as well. How Rwanda will benefit from Nyungwe forests, UNESCO's World Heritage status. That is on page 5 of the New Times this morning. And these are the editorial cartoons that we have this morning. I shall be showing you the rest as well. Communications Authority of Kenya. All right, and we have Chiloba hanging on the line right now from IBC to CA. That is the latest development with financial malfeasance. And we can see currently the questions hanging over him of the mortgage and also him paying himself. Conflict of interest is the biggest issue, and this is what Ozone has captured inside the Star this morning. All right, we had the president also making his maiden speech at United Nations General Assembly there, and this is the latest as we can see. 2023 New York, President Ruto, and a cloud bank of Unga revolution. That is the Unga now revolution in Nairobi, and that is the United Nations Unga. This is just a play on words as well with the Gado. So is there an Unga revolution that is gathering storm up the clouds as well? Well, that's a question of the cost of living, and you can see, as is always depicted as Arab Singh there, also trying to think very hard regarding the cost of living as well. But we shall follow the latest development, as we said, from that particular platform at the United Nations. This is what Gado has captured. And Roger Whittaker, Stano is paying tribute to him as well. Roger Whittaker, 1963-2023, 1936 I should say, 2023, My Land is Kenya. And everyone knows that particular song as well, and we pay tribute to him as well. Peter Kagwanja, good morning, good to see you.
Good morning.
All right, good to see you. Also Dr. Hassan Kanenje. And we want to give a hearty welcome to Dr. Ken Ombuge. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Right, we're waiting to be joined by Dr. Sungi, Simeon Sungi as well, on this particular platform to continue pace with the conversation regarding foreign policy, security, and diplomacy. But still, we were looking at Roger Whittaker, and if we could just have back his smile and that particular picture, well, that would be nice, so that the man from Moranga, Texas.
I thought you would play his song.
We will play his song. We did play his song.
My land is Kenya.
Yes. Yeah, so
any other home.
That's the only one that you know, I bet.
My land is Kenya?
Yes.
Of course not. I mean, if you come from where I come and you wear the
Moranga, Texas
Moranga, Texas cap, then there is another Roger.
There's another Roger there.
Yes, this is Roger Whittaker. There is another Kenny Rogers. Yes. There's an anthem in my place. And Don Williams. What are you talking about?
And of course, local Kamwaro.
And then we come local Camaro. It's also there. Now we have Samido.
Samido also.
Yes. You know?
But of course, when you're talking about patriotism, and this song really gelled Kenyans.
Yeah.
Yesterday, when it broke out the news, we were just reminiscing on the promulgation of the Constitution, where we felt that truly this is our land. And that was a big moment for this country as well.
I think it's the most patriotic song.
Yes.
That we've had in this country. More so when it comes from not the Kamaros and and other Kenyan singers, but a man of British origin who chose Kenya as his land. It's very iconic as a song, and I think Roger Whittaker will go down, in history as one of the most patriotic Kenyan. Not just on the account of his song, but the kind of life he chose, that is very, very closely linked to Kenya. So he deserves a huge tribute from us, from all of us.
Dr. Kanenje.
Interestingly, Prof, you mentioned one of the most patriotic Kenyans, but I think someone of the Daily Nation has refused to acknowledge him as a Kenyan. Instead, he's describing him as a British folk singer. This is embarrassing. Someone who sang so passionately about the country, and yet even at his death, we're actually denying him.
And he was born here.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, this is, I think they need to recall this statement.
They need to recall.
Yes.
All right, so the Daily Nation, you've heard it. The editors need to recall that statement. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, Dr. Ken.
Well, the guy who wrote that probably could be forgiven, because that's a statement that speaks volumes of ignorance, if you ask me. Because whoever wrote that seems not to understand the history of this man, Roger Waithaka, that probably he could have been more Kenyan than some of us, spoke a couple of local languages, and also the influence of this song. In fact, I started singing the song long before I knew who sang it. My land is Kenya. I have no any other home. You know, and it directly speaks to, you know, what we are struggling to be as a country, a nation.
A nation.
Yeah. And if for no any other reason, probably we would respect him for, you know, giving us those relics that we can continue harming long after him. So the statements of ignorance like what Anenche referred to in the nation, they can be forgiven, but they also need to be informed. Probably that's why we are here today.
Probably the writer also was not born then.
That could be, and always there's a tendency to think that life begins when yours begin, and that's why we spend money and time to study history. Something I would recommend to every rational Kenyan.
Rational Kenyan. But you raise a very important issue, that we are struggling to be a nation. We're not a nation yet.
Yes.
You're still a state, but not a nation.
Exactly.
Maybe you could expound more on that.
Well, probably Professor Kawanja is much better placed to respond to that, because he's a political scientist, and my student here, Anenche, is...
Kanenje was your student?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Probably...
It's a bit antsy
it's an interesting situation here, because you, Professor Kawanja, I think some of your contemporaries, Kanyinga, Edu Diambo, Ngunyi taught me.
Yes, Mutainga.
Yeah, so then it extends that you are my teacher.
And so I'm his grandfather.
And probably the lady you live with was my teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the University of Nairobi.
Yes, the University
of Nairobi.
My house. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one who's in my house.
And Kanenje was my student. So Kanenje is
you are guys
an intellectual grandchild.
Yes.
So there's that interconnectedness in the world of academia.
Yes.
Interesting family tree.
Yes. You know, Prof, perhaps you can just, you know, chime in a little bit. You know, a nation is a group of people that share common history, you know, culture and aspirations. But of course, a state is different as defined by the Westphalian, you know, definition, you know, geography, population, you know, sovereignty and stuff like that.
Yes.
Now, many of our countries actually was formed as states, but struggling to become nation states, because you need to build a sense of nationhood to be a full functioning nation state. Now, in Africa, we always make jokes that Somalia is the only nation that is struggling to become a state.
Yes.
While the rest of us, our states, are struggling to become nations.
Yes, I would just join what Dr. Anenche is saying, and thanks for those insights about the genealogies of scholars. in this country. Very insightful. So first and foremost, the idea that a state and nation conflict is European, dating back to 1640s, 48, more specifically the Peace of Westphalia. And therefore the Europeans went on to create ethnic nations, ethnic states, which now they call nations. So what we're talking about here are ethnic states. Africa as a whole, with the exception of Somalia, but even Somalia, when you say 4.5 That point 5 basically talks about the non-Somalis, the Bantus and others who are across the Shebere valleys and Juba valleys and so on. These are farmers and of Bantu origin or Somali Bantus and so on. And other communities, not just Bantus, there is also Arabic, the Bajuns and so on. But the point is, Somalia is exceptional in one way that it is about the only state, the only nation we have in Africa. The rest of Africa are states of nations. And as states of nations, our task is different from the European task. Ours is nation building, building cohesion among many ethnic groups, some of which are larger by far than European nations. Take, for example, the Zulus in South Africa would fit in Sweden twice. You know, the Yorubas can fit in Britain again and again. And so on. So, in a sense, what we call here tribes in Africa are many times larger than European nations. And therefore, our task is harder because we have to build or to heal a nation out of nations. So, not one nation, but nations. For example, in Kenya, we have 42 or 44 nations, depending on who is counting. And when you go deeper into the definition of a nation, the Ruya nation, what you call a Murembe nation, is truly a nation.
It's truly a nation?
Yes, a Kikuyu nation is truly a nation. The only thing they don't claim is the territory. If they claimed that territory, then that's it. We have exceptional problems because some of the nations are cut across national boundaries. Take, for example, when you talk about nation among the Somalis, why it becomes problematic. It means that a chunk of Ethiopia, a chunk of Djibouti, a chunk of Kenya is part of the Somali nation. So that is why the winning concept on the African continent is Pan-Africanism. Because when you talk about Pan-Africanism, then we get a larger concept than the nation in the European sense of the term.
Maybe to just to add something small for the everyday Kenyan out there listening to us. The concept of state, the way we understand it today and the way we try to implement that is basically European. And Professor and Hassan here referred to the Westphalia concept of the state. Westphalia is actually a region in Germany. When the Germans were fighting and finally they settled down and said, guys, let's just stop here and let's agree on how to organize ourselves politically. And the concept of the modern state was then born there. That's what we call the Westphalia model of the state in the 1640s. And the modern states of Europe, emerging from the breakdown of the Roman Empire, took the concept of organizing themselves around certain ethnic groups. That's why it's very easy for them to be nations than what we have in the African continent. And in the African continent, colonialism really interrupted everything. That there are nations that cut across modern states. The Ma nation, for example, stride across Kenya and Tanzania. And for a typical Maasai, will find it extremely interesting when you're asking him, particularly in those days of visas, for a visa to go across to say hi to a brother. Look at what's happening in Western Kenya, where two families are in two different countries, Uganda and Kenya. At some point, there are worries. One of them was an MP in Uganda, and the other one was the vice president of Kenya. Those are contradictions that were brought forth by colonialism.
Indeed, indeed. And we're still struggling to be a nation as it stands right now. And that is just what also the late Roger Whittaker was trying to foster, that this is our land, it's our Kenya, and we should be proud of it as it stands. Right, we want just to also look at what is happening currently, especially in the corporate sector, where a classic case of conflict of interest by applying for and self-approving a mortgage loan, purchase of a house and a 7-acre piece of land, and remitting 25 million shillings to his company may have been the Suspended Communication Authority Director General Ezra Chiloba's Waterloo, as the commission moved in to drop the axe on the DG, who has only been in office for a year. According to the 9th Special Board Audit and Risk Assurance Committee report, Chiloba, alongside other officials in CA, abused the authority's mortgage scheme, including clearing existing staff without review of mortgages being held, causing financial exposure to the authority amounting to 28 million shillings. As KTN's Emmanuel Toh now reports, Chiloba is not new to controversy, resigning from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IBC, after allegations of bungling the 2017 general polls. Technical challenges there. We shall be giving you that story momentarily. But also there was a very interesting editorial cartoon, and we'll be beaming that much later, regarding IBC chair, former chair, or not chair, but the CEO, and now the CEO or Director General of Communications Authority. So maybe we can just touch a little bit on that particular development that is headlining the front page of the Standard as well, the People Daily this morning. Chiloba. There was a frosty relationship between him and the chair, and he was shown the door. And people also questioned, why is Chiloba again being appointed the Director General of Communications Authority, while what really happened at IBC was not made very limpid and clear? So we have the latest development of conflict of interest as well. Is it the same case that maybe he had issue with the IBC chair, the former IBC chair?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an authority on Chiloba.
You don't have to.
And his career, the much I know about him is that he was a CEO.
Yes, but the integrity question is what we're asking. We're not. Yes.
Sure. That's the point, because the integrity questions are very serious. If you make a comment and you don't have the full facts about the case, what I would say. Is that
okay? Can I think I've got my ducks in a row right now. Can I just have it there? Then we can actually chime in as well. Let's just listen into what Emmanuel Toh has for us.
An internal memo issued a few minutes before 9 p.m. Monday by the chairperson of the Communication Authority of Kenya, CA Mary Mugai, announcing the suspension of Ezra Chiloba as the authority's Director General, led to speculation. The reasons for his ouster have remained closely guarded until now. According to the report of the 9th Special Board Audit and Risk Assurance Committee meeting held on August 8, 2023, Chiloba had applied for and self-approved a mortgage loan to facilitate the purchase of property between himself and a Mr. Jacob Simiyu Wahungu, without subjecting the transaction's details to interrogation and approval by a higher authority. The report also indicates that Chiloba purchased a house and a 7-acre piece of land, a number beyond the required 1-acre limit, in violation of the Civil Servants Housing Scheme requirement. The report also alleges a lack of due diligence, whereby his application was approved by a junior staff member. Further, the report details that the authority remitted 25 million shillings to Kitale Hillmost Limited. A company search with the Business Registration Bureau revealed that the seller entity is owned entirely as the sole shareholder and the sole director by Ezra Chiloba Simiyu, the Director General, who is also the buyer in this case. The embattled DG is also accused of clearing exiting staff without reviewing the mortgages being held, causing financial exposure to CA of Kenya shillings 28.8 million shillings. Chiloba has also allegedly understated loan balances for former employees without factoring in the interest component, thereby causing a risk of loss of funds totaling over 1 million shillings. Some of the loan defaulters include Mercy Wanjau, who resigned from CA and now sits at the cabinet as the secretary to the cabinet and owes an outstanding staff mortgage of 19.9 million shillings, Daniel Kipngetich Kiprop 5.9 million shillings, and Kandie Juma 2.7 million shillings. CA also gave the green light to disciplinary action against the Director of Human Resources, the Director of Legal Services, the Director of Finance, and the Internal Auditor. There were also reports of too many unsanctioned trips abroad and issues in hiring staff. Chiloba is not new to controversy. He dramatically announced his own firing on the night of 12th October 2018 following protracted wrangles between him and the Electoral Commission following claims of corruption in the procurement of the 2017 general election material. In a social media post titled "Announcing My Firing," Chiloba said he received his termination letter on Friday but complained that the process was predetermined and unfair. Emmanuel To, KTN News, Nairobi.
And even before we buckle down to that, the Mombasa County Governor, Abdul Somad Nasiri, has blasted the national government for wanting to privatize the port of Mombasa. Speaking during the launch of offshore fishing boats at Old Port Forodhani area in Mvita constituency, the Mombasa governor said enough is enough and that the Mombasa and Coast leadership won't accept the move. Governor Abdul Somad has asked the national government to explain when the feasibility study was done and if the people of Mombasa were involved.
Hatuwezi kubebwa kifalafala na bandari. Ni lazima tujue feasibility gani ilofanywa kuonesha ya kwa hii bandari ya kwa leo wanataka kuibinafsisha. Kwa nini wasiende kubinafsisha Kenya Airways ili ndege nyingine zije kuingia hapa Mombasa? Tukianza kuzungumza habari ya ndege kuweza kutua katika Mombasa, tunaambiwa ya kwa Kenya Airways inaangaliwa, lakini leo wanataka kubinafsisha Kenya Ports Authority. Ukienda katika sehemu ambazo kwamba zenye kukuza miwa, viongozi wameweza kushikana. Wana Mombasa, nisikizeni na nisikizeni kwa makini. Na yakisi mimi yale ambayo kwamba mko nayo nyinyi. Mkiona ya kwa kaunti ya Mombasa imeajiri vijana, mkiona ya kwa tunajaribu kila njia, mkiona ya kwa bei ya leseni tumeweza kuipunguza, mkiona ya kwa ile fedha ya kulipwa na tuktuk na matatu tumeweza kupunguza, sio kwa sababu hatuhitaji fedha, lakini in the laws of economics there is the principle of diminishing returns. Ukachukua ile tauli ukaitia katika maji, ikamue vile utakavyoikamua, lakini mwisho ukaikamua zaidi, itakatika ile tauli, haitoi tena maji.
That is a storm in the port there, and it's bound to draw a lot of reactions as well regarding the participation of the people of Mombasa regarding the privatization of the port as well. Remember, this was a catnip issue also during the President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, where people stoutly denied this, and of course they raised hesitations regarding now the privatization as well. And even as we continue looking at the governance within East Africa, in Tanzania, it is also a very hot topic so far, whether clarity of the sale of a port or the leasing isn't questioned regarding how that was met out or the deal was struck between the Republic of Tanzania and Dubai Wild Ports. Meanwhile, we want to just cross over to where our president is right now, where President Joe Biden has commended President William Ruto's willingness to deploy police officers to Haiti to support and train the Caribbean nation's law enforcement in their efforts to restore stability to the troubled nation. Speaking at the 78th edition of the United Nations General Assembly in New York on Tuesday, which Ruto is in attendance, Biden underscored that the international body must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering globally. He similarly urged the UN Security Council to authorize the mission to the Caribbean nation, further noting that the people of Haiti cannot wait any longer.
To help take on the challenges of their time at the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. And we embrace nations stepping up to lead in new ways and to seek new breakthroughs on hard issues. For example, on Haiti, the Caribbean community is facilitating a dialogue among Haitian society. I think President Ruto of Kenya, I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer.
Back home, the Immigration Department has issued a notice to the public that Kenyans collect their passports from September 25th, 2023. So far, 87,574 passports have not been collected. After this notice, you will be expected to take your passport in less than 30 days. Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Kithure Kindiki, has given a list of locations where you will be expected to collect your passport. They include Nairobi, Embu, Eldoret, Kisumu, Nakuru, Kisii, and Mombasa. The rapid response to this exercise is expected to take place between 5 and 6 weeks. This process is expected to begin today. Those who will have not collected their passports will be fined in accordance to the Disposal of Uncollected Goods Act.
We have in our possession here at Nyayo House and within the regional offices of immigration, 87,574 passports, which must be collected within 30 days, commencing 25th of September 2023. 36,170 passports are here at the head office. Within Nairobi, we'll be distributing 36,170 passports. Embu follows with 10,409 uncollected passports. Eldoret, 9,938. Kisumu, 9,515. Nakuru, 8,023. Kisii, 7,971. And finally, Mombasa, 5,424. Every Wednesday, starting tomorrow, all the applicants who must collect their passports the following week, that those who will not collect their passports as published, as scheduled, after the expiry of the notice, we will treat the uncollected documents as uncollected goods, and therefore we will withdraw and dispose of those uncollected documents at the expiry of the requisite notice periods. And those who are holders of that passport will have to reapply again, and they will pay a penalty for causing us to spend money to print passports which they are not collecting.
Right. So you have been forewarned, of course. Make sure you collect your passport if you haven't. But this is a very interesting editorial cartoon that also is smack dab in the middle of what we were discussing a bit, and we ran you by that particular story, vacillating between IBC and CA right now. Is this man that is hanging there on the line, and we wonder what cloud of integrity questions really hangs over Chiloba. And he's been hardly, of course, 1 year in that particular office, or exactly 1 year, and now he's been shown the door. He was shown the door also from IBC. Integrity, malfeasance, conflict of interest is what now we are questioning regarding Chiloba. Briefly.
I think from the evidence that has been put on the screen and what we have seen, the Chiloba phenomenon basically reflects a typical problem that is inflicting this nation, which is the scramble for the state for personal aggrandizement and enrichment. And in doing so, some survey, they know their way around it, but others are crude, and that's why they are caught. Chiloba's case is a situation where you are caught because you lack the stealing techniques. Because I mean, if the law is that you buy an acre and then you buy 7, then you are doing exactly what everybody is doing, but you just lack the capabilities or techniques to steal. If you want to be a thief, please be a good thief. in this particular case, I think he's a mess on himself. Because the nature of the government is that rules, dictate. I mean, rules are rules, and you follow them the way they are. So if you want to steal within the rules. So in his case, he's doing what many others are doing, but basically doing it, by breaking the rules and everything. We are actually decrying in a growing materialism within our society, to the point that you don't want to get satisfied with what you have, and two, you don't consider your job as a service. You consider it as a platform for self-enrichment. We are long past that avenue where the Roger Whittakers and others of this world would talk about, this is my land. I think there are people who would not even mind saying, this is my property, in their office or in offices, because for them it's all about material, accumulation for your own selfish ends. And people like Chiloba, who have rendered service to this country at very critical positions, needed to know that what is important is not the wealth you make, it's the name you make. Kenyans would rather see, at the end of time, Kenyans would like to have your grave and your grave epitaph engraved in their hearts and minds, not where you're taking yourself. So you basically squander your life by basically getting involved in a house which you may not live for more than another 25 years. So for the next of the millennia, you'll be scandalized. So it's high time we return to the moral foundations of our society. I think that's the point.
Moral foundations.
The moral foundations of our society, and teach our kids that Chiloba was served a very good, a sterling career at the United Nations, then within the IEBC. I knew him personally when he was with the United Nations, and then at the IEBC, a good job under the circumstances. And now you have the opportunity to be appointed at an authority like this one. You need to be an example to the young, but heading this way with this kind of scandal is a down for the country. It's really
going back
it's a low moment.
It's a low moment for him,
for the country, even for the country.
So a good name, and also the good book says a good name is better than rubies.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Kanenje. You own some rubies somewhere.
Dibal, I think some of us were not even surprised. In fact, we're surprised that someone is being followed for 25 million or 16 million, something like that, because living in Kenya, we know that people who are not being followed for billions.
For billions, indeed.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very curious. The rules when it comes to state corporations are always very clear when it comes to conflict of interest. And of course, the board is trying to do what is tasked to do, trying to provide some oversight when it comes to running of these state corporations. The trouble is the conflict of interest is something that is very, very peculiar with our country right now. And it is something that almost goes without notice, to the extent that, number one, it appears like this is the first time, the board is now coming down on one person. I do not believe it's just one person. I don't believe this is the first time. That perhaps they need to do some investigation going back a number of years of what has been happening. Because to the extent that these loopholes existed, it means other people may have exploited before. And so, instead of, I think that the reason, of course, Chiloba right now is, in the front page, in part it's because of the positions he served in the last, perhaps, 10 or so years. And so, because he's been associated with, of course, a number of things, certain controversies, so it's making news. But if we have to be serious, we're going to realize that a lot of looting actually go on in state corporations, and that's part of the reason we lose a lot of revenue. And perhaps because of that, even despite the president's ambition to increase revenue through perhaps taxation here and there, we may not be able to realize some of these revenues, in part because I think there's still a lot of loopholes where people are literally looting the country dry. And so even as we hold Chiloba to account, we need to look at what other areas where people are finding loopholes literally to impoverish, Kenyans and make the country unsustainable. Today, as we speak, I think in part because of the falling shilling against the dollar, our debt repayment has gone up significantly. I think it has passed a trillion, shillings. Now, what are we left with? Like at that rate, honestly, we're going to be having very empty pockets in this country. And if you saw the number of youth who showed up during KDF recruitment, compared to the positions that were available, like 350, and you're having literally tens of thousands show up, it speaks to the desperation as a result of lack of opportunity. And so if we cannot be able to manage these resources, which as public officers, you hold them in trust of the nation, and the younger Kenyans who now comprise close to 70% of the country, you may see another Unga revolution in Kenya. It's not as far-fetched as people think, but people are desperate, and we need to have a more comprehensive approach to it as a country, and an honest conversation why we are where we are, as opposed to perhaps blame games and trying perhaps sometimes to offer people false promises.
Indeed.
Yes.
Right.
Dipal, for me, I'm in a very interesting situation with the question of Chiloba, because I have served as a CEO of a state prestator, just like the Communication Authority.
Yes.
And I know the intrigues that go on. I ran Kenya Utalii College for 7 years with a physical annual budget of about 1.5 billion shillings a year. That's about $16 million. I like what Prof is saying about people beginning to think seriously about their legacies when they serve in public offices. Good name is better than riches, the good book says.
Yes.
And I also like the dimension Hassan is taking, talking about, if you look at it in the Kenyan context, 25 million is like stealing chicken. And you suffer for it. There are people who are stealing, quote-unquote, elephants.
Yes.
And they are scot-free and enjoying their lives out here. But let me add some two dimensions, because at this stage we don't know much, to condemn or to support or do anything with the situation that Chiloba is in now. But one thing I'm aware of is that in an environment like where Chiloba is working as a CEO, there's a lot of power struggles in there, and the power struggles revolves around the money, the resources, the revenues of the organization. And in fact, the conflicts between boards and CEOs is a common phenomenon everywhere. You've heard of the situation in my own University of Nairobi between the Vice Chancellor and the Council. And I guess the thing is, in many places, you find that. So there is bound to be these struggles between the CEO and the operational wing of an organization, and the board, the policy wing of the organizations. And I could wish that these struggles were based on wanting to deliver what these organizations are meant for. But in most cases, it's actually a situation far from it. It's far from it. So as we wait to hear more about what is happening in the Communication Authority, we need also to know that that power struggle within many institutions, parastatals, and even departments within ministries, and is a common thing. The second point is there is a very interesting culture in our own country which probably we need to find a way of dealing with in long term. I loosely call it Mali ya Umma mentality. Mali ya Umma mentality is the attitude that people have towards government property. Government property is probably most of the time there to be stolen, if nothing else, to be destroyed and taken away. And we don't treat that which belongs to government in ways that suggest we recognize the fact that government does not own anything. That which we call government property is property bought using our taxes, and is something we own commonly. That culture is not in the Kenyan psyche. Whether you are working for government or you are working from outside, many of us probably is an opportunity that we have not had to get into that resources, into those properties.
Given you'll actually be playing the same script.
Given that mentality that we have. I just wish that perhaps we will invest money in awareness rising of this idea that governments don't have anything. What governments purport to have are actually things that belong to us. When you see a Chike vehicle, when you see a government building, it is your responsibility as a law-abiding citizen to protect it, because it's yours, in a sense. That very strong patriotic spirit is lacking in us, and it is lacking across board, across generations, across people come from different communities, across many of us and social groups. I think I wish we worked on that. That Mali ya Umma mentality. It is there to be taken. It is there to be destroyed. It is there to not to be used well. I think that's something we need to rethink as a nation.
Indeed. Thank you. Right, we're due for a station break right now. And this is what we were discussing just a bit, looking at the dailies as well, the latest developments as far as the ouster of the Director General of Communications Authority is concerned. You can read all the gritty details in the Standard this morning. And when we circle back, we want to buckle down now on issues to do with security. 10 years on or so, we hack back to the history